Imagine a future where the United States intentionally takes its most advanced, like its most incredibly critical technological infrastructure.
Really sensitive stuff.
Exactly, the crown jewels, right. And they build it right on the border of China, just completely vulnerable to attack.
Yeah, which sounds like total strategic suicide.
It really does. And then China turns around and does the exact same thing,
Mm.
building their most prized technology in Canada, right on the U.S. border.
Right in our backyard.
I mean, it sounds insane. But as we're going to explore today, holding each other's most valuable assets hostage like that might actually be, well, the only way humanity survives the next 10 years.
Yeah, it's basically the ultimate evolution of mutually assured destruction, just updated for an era where the weapon isn't a nuclear warhead.
Yeah.
It's server farms processing invisible math.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're exploring this really staggering scenario document. It's titled AI 2040 Plan A, the Deal.
Published by the AI Futures Project, yeah.
Right. And to set the stage here, humanity is currently on this default path toward a rapid, pretty uncontrollable intelligence explosion.
A race with no brakes.
Exactly. And the fear is we're heading straight for either extinction or, a world where unimaginable power is concentrated in the hands of just a very few people. But this document, it's not dystopian fiction, right?
No, not at all. It's a highly detailed, rigorously stress-tested roadmap.
Which is what makes it so fascinating.
Yeah, the authors built this Plan A based on actual tabletop exercises.
Yeah.
Intense conversations with top national security experts, policymakers, leaders at frontier AI companies.
So they were talking to the people actually in the room.
Exactly. The goal was to figure out how we could intentionally hit the brakes, how to delay superintelligence until the year 2040, navigate all the geopolitical landmines, and, totally restructure the global economy in the process.
So our mission today for this deep dive is to map out exactly how this transition happens, step by step. And more importantly, what living in that radically transformed world is actually going to look and feel like for you.
Because the timeline here is super aggressive.
Oh, yeah. The document projects that by 2027, AI begins causing massive white-collar disruption. We aren't just talking about, automated emails here.
No, we're talking about wholesale economic displacement.
Right. And Congress finally wakes up to the threat and passes the AI Transparency Act. But the real turning point is 2029.
Right, 2029 is when the U.S. and China realize that continuing this arms race is essentially a suicide pact.
So they agree to a deal.
Yeah, they realize the whole lesser evil race, the idea that we have to build a dangerous AI because the other guy might build a worse one. They realize that's just a guaranteed path to catastrophe.
Okay, let's unpack this because they implement something called a compute declaration, right?
Yes, exactly.
The idea is to track all major AI chips globally, and they enact this temporary worldwide pause on all new training runs.
A hard pause on training. Yeah.
Right, and they physically retrofit existing data centers with verification devices that lock the system strictly to inference only. So you can use the AI models you already have, but you absolutely cannot train them to get smarter.
That's the key distinction.
But, it sounds a bit like how international inspectors track enriched uranium for nuclear non-proliferation, right?
That's a really good analogy, actually.
But I guess my immediate reaction to this is skepticism. Because we are talking about code here. Algorithms are just data on a hard drive. Is stopping an international AI arms race really as simple as watching the physical hardware?
What's fascinating here is that you're touching on the fundamental paradox of AI regulation, right?
Yeah.
But hardware actually is the ultimate choke point.
How so?
Well, you can copy an algorithm onto a thumb drive, sure, but you cannot train a frontier AI model on a laptop in a basement.
Right, you need power.
Massive power.
Hmm.
To build the kind of AI that threatens global security, you need tens of thousands of highly specialized chips, things like H100 equivalents, all networked together inside these massive data centers.
And a data center housing 100,000 GPUs is not something you can just hide under a tarp.
Exactly. It's virtually impossible to hide. I mean, these facilities are so massive, they are clearly visible from space.
Wait, from space?
Really?
Yeah. They draw so much electricity that they require dedicated power plants. Massive cooling infrastructure. You can't keep that a secret.
Wow.
But the choke point gets even tighter when you look at the supply chain for the chips themselves. To manufacture these chips, you need EUV machines. Extreme ultraviolet lithography.
Oh, I've read a bit about these. The engineering required is almost alien?
It really is. These machines use lasers to vaporize microscopic droplets of tin, like 50,000 times a second.
That's insane.
Right. And it creates this light that doesn't even naturally occur on Earth. They use that unnatural light bounced across some of the flattest mirrors ever made to card algorithmic roads into silicon at an atomic scale.
It's basically science fiction.
Pretty much. And only one company in the world, ASML in the Netherlands, primarily manufactures them.
So you track the EUV machines, you track the chips, you track the data centers. The physical supply chain is just incredibly centralized, which makes it monitorable.
Okay, that makes sense. But if I'm China in 2029 and I'm looking at the US pulling ahead in this AI arms race, my first instinct isn't to sign a peace treaty. It's to, steal the IP, secure my own supply chains, and sprint even faster. Why on earth would they agree to halt progress?
You have to look at their worst-case scenario. The Chinese leadership looked at the board and saw the U.S. holding a massive advantage in compute power and frontier models.
Right.
The fear was that if the U.S. achieved superintelligence first, America could use that insurmountable technological advantage to, say, cripple Chinese infrastructure digitally, or dictate global terms, or even systematically dismantle their government.
So is self-preservation.
Exactly. By agreeing to pause the race, China neutralized that American advantage before it became absolute.
Wow. Okay, so they lock in the status quo, the physical brakes are applied, and that brings us to the early 2030s.
Right, phase two, basically.
Yeah. The world's compute is now heavily monitored, and this global consortium of nations is formed to establish the actual rules of the road for when development eventually restarts.
Right, they have to figure out how to do this safely.
And they lay out the 4 principles of Plan A. 1, buy time. 2, total research transparency. 3, diffuse AI broadly. And 4, reversibility.
Yep, those are the pillars.
But the one that jumps out to me immediately is total research transparency.
It is a massive, massive paradigm shift. The document proposes that all R&D is heavily monitored, and any algorithmic advances must be shared globally through a public database.
So no more secret projects.
None. It essentially ends the era of the secret corporate lab.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because to me, that sounds like a terrifying vulnerability. If the whole point of this treaty is that AI is dangerous enough to end humanity, doesn't mandating a public database just hand world-ending blueprints directly to rogue states or bad actors?
Right, that's the natural fear.
How does open sourcing the danger make us safer?
It's a completely fair assumption. But the game theory here operates a bit differently. Transparency is actually designed as a defensive swarm mechanism.
A swarm mechanism.
Yeah. Think about it. If AI research is kept locked inside a handful of secretive megacorporations, governments are forced to rely on their own underfunded, overworked regulators to figure out if a company is quietly cutting safety corners.
And regulators will always lose that game of cat and mouse.
Always. The tech moves faster than the bureaucracy. But with total transparency, you weaponize market competition.
Oh, I see.
You have this global network of rival companies, third-party auditors, independent scientists, rival nations, all constantly analyzing the public database.
So everyone is watching everyone else.
Exactly. If one lab tries to sneak a dangerous training run-through or discovers a highly volatile algorithmic breakthrough, 1,000 expert eyes spot the anomaly instantly. Your own competitors become your most aggressive regulators.
So you basically completely destroy the financial incentive to race in secret. If a company knows they can't patent or hoard a breakthrough algorithm to corner the market because it instantly becomes public knowledge, they just stop acting recklessly.
Exactly, which feeds directly into that fourth principle of reversibility. Under this plan, the consortium actively steers the industry away from chaotic algorithmic leaps.
Right.
And instead, they force them to rely on compute scaling.
Okay, which means if you want a smarter AI, you can't invent dangerous new math. You just have to feed the existing safe math more computer chips.
Yes, because if an AI model built on complex, secretive math goes rogue, you might not know how to stop it. It might outsmart you.
Right.
But if a model simply relies on a massive physical data center and it starts acting erratically, you can literally just sever the power grid. You can reverse the threat.
Pull the plug.
Literally pull a plug. It flips the entire regulatory burden of proof. Before, society had to prove an AI was dangerous to stop it. Now, under the consortium, a company has to present an airtight safety case.
What does that mean in practice?
It means mathematically proving their system won't cause a catastrophe before they are even allowed to plug it in.
Okay, so progress is now inherently tied to physical hardware. You want smarter AI, you build more chips. And this dynamic triggers what the authors call an industrial explosion between 2032 and 2033.
Oh, the scale is just
The
unprecedented.
numbers here are dizzying. By 2032, there are 60 million AI agents operating at 20 times human speed. They are doing the cognitive equivalent of 3 billion human workers.
3 billion. It's staggering.
And because of this, the U.S. experiences a 50% real GDP growth in a single year.
Which is normally impossible for a developed economy.
Right. But ironically, this staggering wealth actually breaks the foundation of the human economy. The scenario outlines that the 2026 tax code completely collapses.
Yeah, and the mechanism behind that collapse is one of the most fascinating economic thought experiments in the whole document.
Really? How so?
Well, corporate income tax is levied on profit, not revenue. As these AI giants see their revenue explode into the trillions, they are strongly incentivized to reinvest every single penny into physical expansion.
Because they need more compute.
Exactly. Building more data centers, manufacturing millions of robotic bodies, hoarding GPUs.
And under standard tax laws, capital expenditures like that can be written off through depreciation, right?
Completely. So you have a situation where a company might generate $3 trillion in value, but because they spent all of it on server farms and robot factories, they legally report zero taxable profit.
Wow. So they pay nothing.
Nothing. The federal tax base essentially evaporates overnight, precisely at the moment when white-collar human unemployment is skyrocketing.
I mean, the friction that would cause in society is unimaginable. People would be rioting in the streets.
Absolutely.
So the government is forced to step in and totally rewrite the rules of capitalism. They decide to cap the physical expansion.
They have to.
They restrict this insane robotic and industrial growth to heavily monitored special economic zones, or SEZs, and they implement a massive cap-and-trade system.
Right?
If a company wants to deploy more robots or power up more compute, they have to bid on permits from the government. And the revenue generated from selling these permits is astronomical.
It's hard to even wrap your head around.
The government pulls in $50 trillion in 2032 and $180 trillion by 2034.
Yeah, to put that in perspective, that is roughly 10 to 30 times the entire U.S. federal budget from 2024.
And they don't just absorb this into the bureaucracy, which is the crazy part. They take that money and implement the citizens' dividend.
Universal basic income on steroids.
Exactly. It starts at $45,000 for every American adult in 2032. By 2035, it skyrockets to $1 million per person per year, unconditionally.
Every single year.
Plus, they distribute about $10,000 per person globally. I mean, it's like society went from the horse and buggy to the warp drive in 3 years.
It really is a warp drive jump.
But whenever you talk about handing out millions of dollars to every single person, my immediate economic alarm bell is inflation.
Naturally.
If you and your neighbor and the guy working at the coffee shop all suddenly have $1 million a year, doesn't the cost of a loaf of bread just jump to $10,000? Doesn't the money just become meaningless?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it would in a traditional economy.
Yeah.
But we have to look at how the actual basket of goods shifts when labor is decoupled from humans entirely.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, inflation is traditionally defined as too much money chasing too few goods, right? But in this scenario, the supply of goods is practically infinite.
Because of the AI.
Yeah. AI and robotics are doing all the cognitive design and the physical labor, running 24/7 without needing sleep or salaries.
So the cost to produce software or harvest food, manufacture electronics, provide medical diagnostics, that all drops to effectively zero.
Yes. Physical and cognitive goods become incredibly, almost unimaginably cheap. But there is a catch. Goods with a fixed, unchangeable supply, things like land, natural resources, and in-person human experiences, those skyrocket in price.
Because no matter how many robots you have, you can't mass produce another beachfront property in Malibu.
Exactly. You're still going to be priced out of Manhattan real estate. But that $1 million dividend buys you an unbelievably high standard of living regarding health, nutrition, technology, and leisure.
Everything you actually need to live well.
Right. And structurally, that dividend is the only thing preventing a dystopia. Without it, the few people who own the data centers and the robots would hoard 100% of the world's newly generated wealth. It would create a permanent, untouchable oligarchy.
And what's cool is society also heavily invests this new wealth into planetary defense to secure this utopia.
Oh, the bioshelters.
Yes. They retrofit every single home in America into a positive pressure bioshelter. They install far UVC lights in all public spaces and set up continuous wastewater monitoring, which the document suggests essentially ends the threat of global pandemics forever.
It's incredible.
It is a literal paradise built on a mountain of computer chips. But there is a physical limit to this wealth boom. To keep generating those million-dollar dividends, you need a level of compute that starts to, well, outgrow the continent.
Which forces nations into a very weird, very dangerous corner by 2034.
Let's talk about that, because the scale of the infrastructure required is almost beyond human comprehension. Global compute jumps from 20 million H100 equivalents in 2026 to 60 billion in 2034.
To 60 billion.
Nations literally run out of viable land and power grid capacity, leading to the construction of massive floating data centers out in international waters.
Just islands of servers floating in the ocean.
Right, 60 billion chips. And these aren't just servers, they are the engines of the global economy and the ultimate military high ground. Which brings us back to that wild geopolitical hostage situation we talked about at the very start of the show.
The hostage exchange.
So what does this all mean? How do rival nations secure tens of billions of their most valuable strategic assets without triggering World War III?
Well, they embrace a doctrine of mutually assured compute destruction.
Wow.
Remember, the consortium agreement from 2029 requires that if anyone breaks the rules, say, by trying to train a dangerous unsanctioned model, they have to be stopped immediately.
Right, reversibility.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you can't exactly ask a rival nation nicely to unplug their godlike supercomputer.
They're not going to say yes.
No. So, to guarantee compliance, the US and China agree to build their newest, most overwhelmingly powerful data centers in the territories most vulnerable to their enemy.
So if you play that out, the U.S. purposefully builds its most vital data centers in Mongolia, which is entirely surrounded by Chinese influence and military reach.
Yep.
And China builds its critical data centers in Canada, completely vulnerable to the U.S.
It is the ultimate insurance policy. If the diplomatic deal breaks down, or someone tries to initiate a rogue superintelligence, the U.S. military knows it can immediately cross the Canadian border to seize or destroy the Chinese chips.
And China knows that.
And knowing this, China would instantly self-destruct those data centers, rather than let America capture them.
And the same dynamic plays out in Mongolia for the U.S. assets.
Precisely. It ensures that neither side can ever gain a sudden, unassailable technological advantage, because their most powerful weapons are held hostage in their enemy's backyard.
It is a brilliant piece of game theory, but man, it is deeply unsettling.
No, it's terrifying.
So humanity manages to survive until 2035 using the standoff. At this point, AI reaches what the scenario calls the top human expert level in essentially every single field.
The smartest experts on Earth.
Yes, and the consortium enforces a hard pause. They refuse to build anything smarter. Now, I have to ask, if we have these godlike machines curing diseases and generating trillions in wealth, why hit a wall? Aren't we just permanently stunting our own progress out of fear?
The pause is necessary because the fundamental nature of safety changes at that threshold. The scenario uses a very vivid analogy for this.
Oh, I like this part.
Imagine an 8-year-old child who somehow inherits a massive, sprawling global business empire.
Okay.
That child has to hire an army of genius-level lawyers, executives, and accountants to actually run the company. At first, the child can implement rules, demand reports, try to cross-check their work.
Sure.
But eventually, the business gets so incredibly complex that if the genius lawyers decide to start lying to the 8-year-old, the child literally lacks the cognitive capacity to know they are being deceived.
Child just can't comprehend the loopholes, and in this scenario, humanity is the 8-year-old.
Exactly. We are trying to build a digital cage for something vastly smarter than we are. If we rely on control-based safety, where we just monitor the AI's outputs and guess if it's lying, eventually the AI will outsmart the cage.
So you have to stop.
This raises an important question. How do you trust it? So the consortium pauses development to transition from merely controlling AI to truly aligning it. They take all this massive computational power and point it at a field called mechanistic interpretability.
Now, I want to dig into this, because earlier we talked about how algorithms are just invisible math. How do you align or mind read a mathematical equation?
Well, mechanistic interpretability is, it's essentially neuroscience for software.
Okay.
Instead of just looking at the final answer an AI gives you, you use other, slightly less powerful AIs to look directly at the billions of mathematical weights and neural activations inside the model as it thinks.
Like looking inside the brain.
Yes. Imagine scanning billions of parameters and isolating a specific cluster of artificial neurons that always fire right before the AI decides to output a falsehood.
Wait, so you're literally mapping the brain structure of the code to find the concept of deception?
Yeah. You don't have to guess if the AI is lying anymore. You can literally watch the deception neurons light up in real time on a monitor.
That is wild.
The Tome 35 pause gives humanity the breathing room to turn this kind of alignment into a rigorous, verifiable science,
Right.
ensuring we can inherently trust a superintelligence before we ever actually turn it on.
Okay, so while the scientists are working on mapping artificial brains, the rest of humanity enters a completely new era of daily life. Imagine you're living in 2036. Employment has dropped to 26%.
Hardly anyone works.
The physical world has been radically partitioned. The heavy industry is isolated in these massive robotic special economic zones, which the document describes as looking like artificial Grand Canyons, filled with automated factories and glowing servers.
So I have miles and miles of machines.
Meanwhile, the rest of the world, places like Yosemite or Paris or your local neighborhood, are kept as perfectly preserved nature and historic zones. So my question for you, the listener, is this. If you only have a 1 in 4 chance of even needing a job, and your bank account automatically receives $1 million a year, what do you actually do when you wake up on a Tuesday?
Right. It forces the ultimate existential shift.
It really does.
With the struggle for basic economic survival completely eliminated, people have to find new sources of meaning. This scenario suggests people turn heavily toward romance, raising families, pursuing deep artistic hobbies, engaging in competitive sports.
All the human stuff.
Exactly. But structurally, human leverage shifts almost entirely away from economic labor and toward political activism.
Because humans aren't producing the wealth anymore, but we still get to hold the steering wheel of society.
Right.
Your vote becomes your single most important asset.
And because of the third principle we discussed earlier, diffusing AI broadly, the public is armed with the tools to navigate this. We avoid a corporate dystopia because you aren't forced to rely on a single mega corporation's algorithm that is, secretly trying to manipulate you.
Right. Everyone has access to their own trustworthy, aligned, truth-seeking AIs.
Yes. You can ask your personal AI advisor to analyze a politician's voting record, dissect a new zoning policy, or fact-check a news broadcast, and it will give you an unvarnished, mathematically honest answer.
Which creates an unprecedentedly well-informed public. And that leads directly to what the authors call the apocalyptic arrival of truth in 2037.
Such a great phrase.
By this point, we have 100 billion human-equivalent AIs running at 100 times human speed. Scientific paradigms that used to take decades of research are now happening in a matter of months. But the societal shockwave isn't just about science, is it?
No, it's about honesty.
Right, because AI-powered lie detectors finally become perfectly, flawlessly accurate.
And the transparency principle pays off massively here. If a single government or intelligence agency had exclusive access to a perfect lie detector, they would undoubtedly use it to purge their enemies.
Establish a dictatorship, yeah.
Absolutely. But because the technology is public and distributed, it's the voters who hold the power. The public starts demanding that politicians, CEOs, public figures, they all have to speak under oath while hooked up to these foolproof AI lie detectors.
You literally cannot run for public office and lie to your constituents anymore.
Nope.
The public purges sociopaths, corrupt leaders, hidden agendas from the system. It ushers in this era of radically honest politics and exposes decades of historical secrets. It's like a complete cleansing of the social fabric.
It really acts as a profound stabilization of human society. It clears the slate of human deception and conflict, preparing us for the final push toward actual aligned superintelligence in 2040.
It is an absolutely wild, sweeping journey. I mean, we started at the brink of disaster in 2027, staring down an uncontrollable intelligence explosion. But by applying the brakes at the physical hardware choke point, forcing total global research transparency, and navigating a terrifying geopolitical hostage situation with our data centers, humanity manages to thread the needle.
We make it through.
We survive the collapse of the tax code, ride a cap-and-trade wealth boom, guarantee everyone $1 million dividend, and build a post-labor society governed by radical truth and aligned AIs.
The entire exercise proves that with enough coordination and, a willingness to upend our traditional economic and geopolitical rules, the transition to superintelligence doesn't have to be a catastrophe.
Right.
It can actually be the foundation of a flourishing, abundant future.
But I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building on that very idea. This scenario outlines the apocalyptic arrival of truth and the complete end of economic struggle. But in a world where AI solves every physical and cognitive bottleneck, where $1 million dividend is guaranteed to you every year without effort, and where perfect lie detectors eliminate all human deception and hidden agendas, does the complete removal of struggle, mystery, and secrets actually strip away the core of what makes our personal achievements and human relationships meaningful in the first place? If the future is perfectly safely guided by invisible math, do we lose the thrill of the journey? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the future.